Hi, my name is Chris Duvall, and I am an alcoholic. I'd first like to thank Kevin for asking me to speak yesterday. It's always an honor and privilege to speak at Alcoholics Anonymous. Just a couple of things to get out of the way. For the locals who have been here a little while, my apologies. Many of you have heard my story. I'm more or less speaking to the back of the room, really. Mostly, it's a really weird feeling tonight. I was sitting here going around the room, and I know half the people in this room tonight, which is, wow, meeting like this size, Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been involved with many of your lives, and you've been involved in mine. And I've had the privilege, and in fact, still sponsor a number of guys that are still in here. Used to sponsor some. Anyway, for those who are confused, I used to live here. In fact, I moved here early in my sobriety, my first year of sobriety. I got sober January 6, 1985. And moved to Las Vegas shortly afterwards, and was here for 20 years, and just moved recently, about a year and a half ago, up to Everett, Washington. And if you don't remember anything else tonight, there's a little bit of trivia you can take with you. Everett, Washington is just like 20 miles north of Seattle. Everett, Washington boasts the largest building in the world. That's the Boeing plant, for you people who know that. Yes, the Boeing plant is in Everett, Washington. And there's a lot of drunks there, too. So I'm one of them. So, anyway, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it was like, what happened, and what I'm like today. That's what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's what is my job tonight. And I want to thank Dave for speaking. He did a very good job, Dave. We'll talk later. But Dave is one of those people I've had the privilege to sponsor since being new. And I'm glad your sponsor told you that. It wasn't me. But that's what our book says. And, about if you're not convinced, go get convinced. The only, thing I'll throw out before that is that, here's the rub to that. You might not make it back. So if you're here now, stick around and, find out if you really got this thing. And my suggestion is you get with somebody who has been through the process and can take you through the process. Because, my sponsor said something to me. My first sponsor, he asked me if, Chris, if you didn't have cancer, would you go for chemotherapy? And I thought that was kind of a strange question. And I said, no, why? He said, what would you do? I said, well, I'd probably go get a second opinion. He said, well, why would you do that? I said, well, I'll make sure I have cancer before I'm going to do something dramatic, like go for chemotherapy, because those who are familiar with chemotherapy, it's the treatment is pretty nasty. And I understand what he was talking about today. Why would you take the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous if you really ain't got this thing? Because it's not my nature to do stuff like I'm doing now. It's not my nature. I do it a lot, but it's still not my nature to do that. I had to be convinced to my innermost self that I am an alcoholic. And the only way to do that for me was to go through the process, starting at the doctor's opinion, and find out what this disease really is, how it's, it's a spiritual disease, physical manifestations. And I had to go through that and identify. And it wasn't a pleasant process, don't get me wrong. Like, ooh-wee, I'm an alcoholic, this is great. Let's get on with giving to other people. It was trudging. Our book uses the word trudging. And that's the way it was for me. When I actually finally did surrender to my innermost self, I was then willing to do whatever I had to do, And I've heard things in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous like, you can always tell a drunk, but you can't tell him much. And I find that's a half-truth, My experience with that is a half-truth, because I was willing to follow some direction that my sponsor gave me. But a couple of things had to happen first. The first thing that had to happen was I had to be convinced in my innermost self that I had this deal, and that him, by sharing his experience, that he was like me, and he really knew what it was like. Those feelings that happened to me, sober. What happens to me is described in the doctor's opinion before I take a drink. and it describes having alcoholism as being restless, irritable, and discontent. See, I didn't know I have alcoholism whether I drink or I don't drink. I did not know that when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I believe I was an alcoholic from my very first drink because that's all I ever knew. When I took that first drink, the magic happened for me. And, I overshot the mark and, went through the process, passed out and all that. And, started doing that whole thing again. And what my sponsor was, he was sharing his experience, strength, and hope. And what I found was I was like him. He knew the deal. He knew what it was like, for the first time. And it was really funny because I identify with him not because he was telling me what I needed to do. He was sharing his experience, strength, and hope. And, I found that's what happened to me. That was the first time in my life that somebody was sharing what was going on with them and what they did. Wasn't telling me what I needed to do because I need to get my act together and this is what you need to do. And, I think that's why Alcoholics Anonymous is so successful today. It's the first time in history, of the disease of alcoholism where it's being shared, a solution has come from the inside, And when I identified with him, I knew I was screwed. I really did. The gig was up. And I was willing to take direction. And I am not a person by nature, even to this day, is willing to take direction. I am willing to take direction today, but it's not by my nature. I have this alcoholism thing, and this alcoholism thing I found in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the definition and, what it does to us, but it's inside of me. And, what it does, what it did for me, and what it did to me. When I got to a treatment center, that's what they shared about. They shared about what alcohol did for them, and I could really relate what alcohol did for me. Alcohol was that magic potion for me. It hit my system, and I only drank and drug for 9 years, and but I mean, from my very first drink, it was on me. I started at 13 years old and drank and drugged until I was 22, and the magic happened for me. The only times I could, there were consequences for my drink, and there were consequences for my first drink. I heard people share that in meetings, it's the consequences that got them here. And that's partially true, because I had consequences throughout my drinking. I'd gone to jail and institutions and things like that. And, while it got my attention, it wasn't enough to sustain, it was more like, okay, I won't do that again, type thing. Or when I get out of here, I'm going to do it different this time. And, the briefly sober alcoholics plan, that I've heard many people describe. And, that's the way it was for me. And I believe that, I had, I was suffering from a number of delusions. Drinking wasn't one of them. I thought the way I drank was perfectly normal, really. My family life is, I come from a slightly alcoholic home. My grandfather escaped or came off the reservation in northeastern New York. He was a Narragansett Indian. And he married, into my great-grandmother came from Ireland. And, I'm a product of a Native American Irish union. And there are a few drunks in my family. But, that in itself doesn't make me alcoholic because I had two sisters that are not alcoholic. They're kind of screwed up, but, they're not alcoholic. My grandfather was an alcoholic. Had 7 kids. None of them were alcoholic. 5 of them married alcoholics. My mother married 2. So I've been raised with the Irish and drinking, and so I thought the way I drank was perfectly normal. Getting caught wasn't cool, but drinking the way I drank was perfectly normal. And in fact, I can remember the very first thing I was taught in my home. One of the first things I was taught in my home was how to nurse a hangover. And I look at it today. I don't think that's one of the things that you teach a 13-year-old, normally. But what they were doing, they were doing it with love. I mean, because this is, family tradition, and, get used to it because this is what we do. And, it sounds funny here, but it was real. I mean, that's where, where I grew up and lived. And, like I said, I took my first drink at 13, and the magic happened, and of course I overshot the mark. I said that earlier, and I continued to do that, and it was okay. Occasionally I was taught that my stepfather who raised me taught me that if you want to play, you got to pay. And that was something ingrained for me from very young. So if I was going to go out and drink and drug and do those things, occasionally I was going to have to pay the price of whatever that was. And, it was never really a conscious thought for me. Like, okay, this is, most of my life has been lived below that level of consciousness. I hear people talk about their plans and things like that. And I had mentioned my plan, but that was never really a conscious plan. I live my life. I'm a true heathen. I live my life, to have a good time and to, and I would do work and do things that, you're supposed to be doing, but that was only to get the reward that I wanted. And, I would work so I could play, and I would make money so I could drink and do those things. But that was never a conscious thought. It's just the way I live. So I was building my resume to come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and it was like the book says, the doctor's opinion talks about the alcoholic life seems the only normal one, and I can relate to that because my life was it's funny because I used to watch TV shows growing up like the Brady Bunch and Gilligan's Island. The Brady Bunch was an interesting one for me because I don't know, something drew me to the Brady Bunch. I don't know why, because I don't know, I used to find it amusing, I guess, living in that type of, family environment, because that was not my family environment growing up. My world and everything about, my world was all about me and drinking. And, that was okay because it was doing the magic thing. Like I said, I never had conscious thoughts about I don't like being sober, but I live my life like I don't like being sober. And I didn't realize that until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, till I was sentenced to that treatment center. And, I continued to drink and do the things that we do while drinking. And, some of those was, I went out and I chased the party. And, I do the things that kids where I come from do. I was born and raised in Staten Island, New York. And, I talk about that. At a younger age, I grew up in the projects. And, I mentioned that, but that's only like that wasn't really my reality. I was one of those burnt-out kids living out in the suburbs, really. And, my story, kind of really, up until like 18, my story was a lot like that movie Dazed and Confused. And I saw that movie, I really related, because it was weird to see it from the other side being sober, watching the kids in that movie who were me, act and interact and, chase the party and do the things that we do. And what happened to me for my first drink, I went to school, and I was never really good at school because they got rules. And not that I'm dumb, I just, I'm not good with rules. And, go figure. And, so I always kind of had this little rebellious thing about me. And once again, it was never a conscious thought that I was rebellious. It's just, the way I lived my life. I have two older sisters, and I'm the youngest, and I'm the only boy, and I was kind of doted on a bit in that respect. So I guess, my world revolving around me kind of fit. And so, I drank and I drugged and I did the things that I do. And what happened is I stopped going to school after like my freshman year. I was like 14, or 13, 14, right around the time I started drinking and drugging. Coincidence. So I hung out, pitched quarters, and did my thing to get the money I needed to do the things that we do. And I did that for like 3 years. And, it was kind of weird. Like all of a sudden, 3 years later, all the people I started school were graduating. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't like I stopped going to school. I stopped going to class is what it was. Because I still went to school because they had the drugs and, and the games and, the things that I like. And, so these people are starting to graduate and, and through a series of getting in trouble, I wound up getting stuck in that program that they create for kids like me. And, I got to take, I went to school for like another 2 or 3 months. I got to go to class. I said, if you go to class for 2 to 3 months, you can take your GED. And, and then we'll give you a high school diploma. And I'm thinking 3 years, 3 months, good trade. So I said, okay, yeah. So I went and I did quite well, actually. So I took my GED with a freshman education. It was really kind of interesting because I don't consider myself very smart. In fact, up until I got sober, I think I was kind of functionally illiterate. I had read one book before getting sober in my life, one book. And it was The Hobbit or some, and I didn't know why. I was taking mushrooms or acid at that time or something was going on. And, yeah, I don't know. I think I was on a ship. Yeah, I was on a ship, and I was a captive audience, and I don't know, I couldn't drink or drug. And so, anyway, it was strange. So I take this test, and I graduate, and I do fairly well. And, now it's amazing, how we have this knack for blotting out reality, or twisting and distorting reality. Because now in my mind, I'm like, hey, I'm a pretty smart guy. I'll go to college. I can't go to school because they have rules. I can't do those things because it's just not my nature. I'm a good starter, don't get me wrong. So 3 months is a good start and finish, okay? And that's about my limit, for doing what I had to do there to get what I had to get. And so, I did that. And I went to school, and, I showed up, and I went to, I don't know, people are familiar, DeVry Technical Institute. And we're in New Jersey. Tells you how much I remember that, because I went there for all of like 2 weeks or a week or something. I don't know. And they gave this thing called homework, and I don't do homework, and they were expecting that you had to do something when you came to class. And, here's the thing. Once again, it wasn't a conscious thought for me. I just stopped because, it's hard to, smoke pot and, and do acid and drink and do homework. I don't know. I found it hard anyway. I know some people have done that and gotten their degrees, and but it just wasn't in the stars for me. So I wound up dropping out of school, and right around that time, I just turned 18. My stepfather, who's Irish, did something I thought was really cool. Oh, by the way, what time do I go to? 8:25. 8:25. Cool. Ooh. I'll talk slower. Or earlier. So he did something I thought was really cool. His name's Patrick McDermott, and he was a New York City fireman. And he bought a bar with his friend Cornelius Murphy, and they called the place McNeil's of all. Yeah. And at that time, it was like 1980. The legal drinking age was 18. And, not that that really mattered. I'd been drinking and drugging for, 13, 14, 5 years at that time. So, but, it was cool because I could go in there and, I had the keys. And I could go open and I could go close. And because they close bars in New York, for those people from Las Vegas, they have the light when it flashes. I kind of laughed because I said last call, and some people who are not from Vegas understood that. Here you don't have to worry about that. So if you go back out, don't worry about it. It's not an issue. So, I'm bartending. I'm 18 years old. And it was a really weird thing happened to me physically. I'm one of these, what they call, I guess, late bloomers. I did not start physically maturing till like later in life. It was weird. I really believe that drugs had a lot to do with that. The amount of drugs I was doing was amazing, especially pot. Smoked a lot of pot. But, so I was like 5'8". I'm 18 years old. I'm 5'8", 235. And hanging out in the bar, and life's okay because the consequences aren't that bad yet. But I'm starting to get a little bit. My mother was just, she was getting really worried because she saw the writing on the wall. She knows what my real father was like, who left when I was like 3 or 4. And she suspected that I was going down that wrong path. And so she would, constantly have those speeches with me. You really need to do something with your life. And I don't know, something I guess got through, and I had a friend, he had just came home, one of the guys I used to drink with, and he went in the Marine Corps, and he was telling me how wonderful everything was in the Marine Corps, and how, okay. So, I don't know, something sold me on it, because I knew I had to get out. This is what's weird, because it wasn't a conscious thought, but it's, like just under the surface for me. Something ain't quite right. And so, I did. I joined the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps fit very well with my lifestyle, actually. You could drink, and although the work part wasn't cool, although some of that I liked, it fit very well with my drinking and my pattern. I had someone to take care of me, so I had, a cot and 3 squares, that type of thing. And, I got to drink and party and tour the world and, do what I do in other countries, sample their beer or whatever else. And that's what I did. And it was going okay. I was kicking and screaming because I was a young kid. But I went in the Marine Corps. I was 5'8", 235. I'm 19 years old. I'm 6 foot now, but I'm 19 years old and I'm 235 pounds. And 3 months later, I'm 5'10", 170 pounds. And yeah, that was kind of interesting. Scared the shit out of my mother. Yeah, I've done that a lot, actually, drunk and sober. Mostly drunk, though. So anyway, I'm cooking through the Marine Corps, and it's going okay. And it was amazing because I went in a boot camp, and this was like I said, there's not many conscious thoughts, but this was a conscious thought for me. I'm going to quit doing all those things now. I'm going to stop smoking because I'm smoking a couple of packs a day, and I'm drinking and all that. So here's my chance to get in shape, change my life, and do those things. And 3 months, boot camp was 3 months, and like I said, I grew 2 inches, lost 65 pounds, and stopped smoking and all that. It was amazing. The night I got out, I went back to McNeil's. That's what I do. And, I start drinking and, the weed came out and, it was just like, and then started smoking and, just doing the things like I hadn't missed a beat, and there was no defense or, idea that I shouldn't do this anymore or, wait, didn't you make a commitment to stop doing those things? But it never really had anything to do with stopping the drinking because I love drinking. My favorite times in life up to that point were drinking and things that happened while drinking. And because that was most of my life up to that point. And, it was one of these things where I did not like being sober. And I loved the effect produced by alcohol. And so I did what I do and went and, Marine Corps started cracking down. In fact, where's Al? Al's in the back. Yeah, Al was very instrumental in my sobriety, believe it or not. Al was in this thing called the U.S. Navy. And in the late 70s, early 80s, I think it was late 70s, he was stationed on the aircraft carrier USS Nimitz. And there's something happened on the Nimitz back around the late 70s that was very instrumental in my sobriety in 1985, was that they had crashed a couple of the planes right on the flight deck of the USS Nimitz in 79. And the Navy did something at that time. They thought, I heard a rumor or something that some of these people might have been stoned. And so they drug tested all the people on the flight deck, including the pilots, and I think 80% came up positive on that test. 80%, including pilots, yeah. So Navy started, they couldn't bury their head anymore and said, and said that they needed to do something about this problem. And so they started creating some detoxes and things like that. And this is right while I was going through the process and getting ready for one of their detoxes. And so, I'm drinking, I'm drugging, I'm doing my deal, and something happens where, I'd been dodging bullets. I'm really good. I was really good at, getting out of trouble. That was my thing. I learned to get around things. And I was the go-to guy to get around things. But you can only get around things for so long. And that's what happened to me. I'm drinking, I'm drugging, I'm doing what I do. And I'm shooting angles, and I'm getting away with it up until I can't get away with it anymore. And I got some trouble in Japan. And they have laws in Japan, not against drinking, but, against doing a lot of the things that I do while drinking. And I got caught doing those things, and I was facing some serious time in a Japanese prison. And and it's, don't get me wrong, it wasn't like I quit drinking. It wasn't that bad. So, it was never even a consideration. What happens is I get out of that trouble through a series of circumstances, and I get sent back to the States, and I got 6 months left to do, and it's New Year's in 1985, and something happened too. I can remember that. That is the point in time. I can tell you the exact point in time when alcohol quit doing for me what it used to do for me, and started doing things to me. And like I said, I was raised with one of the ideas my father had given me is that you want to play, you got to pay. So I was willing to go through those things I had to go through to do the things I had to do. Up until this point, when things changed, everything changed, and alcohol stop doing those things that used to do for me. And I'm still drinking. And, and I don't know what's going on, but I'm starting to do things like I'm fairly social. And when I'm drunk, I'm very social. And, so people talk about drinking and, hiding and, and doing those things, how we start to withdraw from life. And I never related to that. I mean, most of my drinking up to the very end was like being very social and going out and drinking, being the life of the party and all these things. And what happened at the end of my drinking is I started drinking and it wasn't doing what it used to do for me. And I started being that person who was retreating. And that was a very weird experience, although it wasn't a conscious experience. I just knew below the surface something wasn't right, and I continued to drink. And New Year's of '85, they sent us home for a 96-hour pass. It was a 4-day pass, and they said, when you get back, we're going to have a drug test. Let me tell you about my drugs up until that point. I'm an alcoholic. I've done just about every drug you can do. However, I started tapering off my drug usage towards the end of about halfway into my enlistment, and my drinking just took off. And interesting, I didn't realize that until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous and started learning about alcoholism, that my drugs started slowing down. And, because I heard people, drugs brought them here quicker, and that's cool, it's your story. Well, when my drugs started slowing down, my alcohol just consumption and drinking just escalated even more. And so we went home for this 96-hour pass for New Year's of '85, and they said, when you get back, we're going to have a drug test. I said, no problem, we can drink, right? They said, of course you can drink, Yeah. So I said, okay. Now, I have no idea when I drink, it's just, there's no conscious thought about what I'm going to do. It's like whatever's there, And sure enough, I went home and I started drinking, went to a party, and, the joint came around and, I just took the joint, no conscious thought, maybe I shouldn't do this, And, so I did it because this is what I do. And, and somebody was passing around a mirror and, check everything, yeah. So did that, and somebody had some mescaline, and it was just no conscious. Hey, it's New Year's, and I'm serving my country, and so I'm home, and I just do all this stuff, and it wasn't until we started heading back, and all the guys, when there was 4 of us, all the guys who went up there with me, I was stationed in North Carolina, who drove back to New York with me, they all did the same thing, because, they were like me. And so one of the guys we were with, he came up with a brilliant plan. I didn't know about this plan until later. He went and talked to the CO and worked out this deal where, remember that I was telling you earlier about the Navy had created this program and things, for people like us. And he worked a deal with the CO, and if we volunteered, we said we had a problem, we would go to this program, and this is all I heard: you don't have to take a drug test. Okay. I have to take a drug test, right? Okay. I didn't hear about volunteering for the program. I just, my hand went up, and I didn't have to take a drug test. That's all I knew, because I was about to get popped, and I only had like 5 or 6 months left, and so I thought I dodged another bullet. However, here was the rest of the story. Andy Rooney. You had to go see this counselor, a drug and alcohol counselor, and he talked to me and he asked me some questions, and very similar. I think it was like the 20 questions. There were 20 questions around in AA, and maybe there's 40. I don't even know how many questions it is, but he's asking me these questions about drinking and how I drink and things like that. Now, you got to understand, this is kind of strange for me. They talk about lying. It wasn't like I never lied about my drinking, because, if I would have told the truth, I would have got caught. Like, did you have a drink today and go to work? Maybe I've done that sometimes, but I'm not going to say that. So, but I never thought I had a problem to have to lie about my drinking, because compared to the rest of my family, I hadn't gone that far yet. And so he's asking me questions, and I'm telling him the truth, because I really don't think I have anything to hide. I'm just getting out of the drug test, and, he's asking me questions about my drinking, and, I never heard these questions. He tricked me. I just never heard these questions before. Because no one ever really, they said things like, maybe you should slow down your drinking and not drink that, or, if you're going to drink like that, you still need to get up and go to work, like my father did. And, things like that. I mean, you can drink and go through all that stuff as long as you show up and do your job. That's the ethic that I was raised in, and you don't get caught. And so he's asking me, and I'm giving these answers, and this guy just lit up. He was like a Christmas tree. He's writing down all this stuff on his clipboard. And halfway in, he realizes he's got someone of his kind sitting on the other side of the table who knows nothing about alcoholism, and because he was one of us. And he puts down his pencil and stops the interview right there, and he says, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and would you be willing to go to a meeting with me this evening? And you got to understand the mindset of me at this time. I'm like, I stopped, and it caught me off guard. And here's what's going on behind in my thoughts. It's like, why? I didn't explain to him the part, I'm just here to get out of the drug test. If you want to talk about alcoholism, you can go see my father, my stepfather, my uncle, my grandfather, but he was dead already from alcoholism, and all the men in my family. And except, I'm not that bad yet. And, it's just amazing. And, they call it a disease of, I've heard people say it's denial. And, not that I don't have denial. I have denial. I like a good lie every now and then. But I have this thing, the book describes this as a delusion, And I thought, here's what I really believe. I believe if you just left me alone or did what I wanted you to, we'd get along fine. And, that's an old idea. The book calls that an old idea. That's an old idea I have still to this day had a hard time getting rid of. Because it keeps rearing its ugly head again. And, but I truly believe that at that time. And it had, didn't really have much to do with my drinking. It had to do with that idea, that old idea. And, so he did something there that really saved my life. And what he did was that he sentenced me to a treatment facility. And, we crumb on treatment facilities sometimes in AA. And, we have no opinion on outside issues. It's like religion and all that other stuff, too. We really have no opinion. That's what our literature says. And, it saved my life, because what it did is he tried to introduce me to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I said no. And what he did is he sent me to a treatment facility. And you got to understand, the Marine Corps, the Navy's treatment facility was a lockdown ward at a military institution in Memphis, Tennessee. And that's where I just met somebody this trip who got sober a year and a half before me at the same institution, had the same counselor. I just met him on this trip. Bizarre, 22, 23 years ago. And talk about a small world. And he did that, and he sentenced me. But here's what happened. They didn't have anything available at that time, and that was the beginning of January. And I had to wait till March. And here's the Marine Corps' solution for alcoholism at that point, was this drug called antabuse. And I don't know if they still give it, or I see some heads nodding. I know I'm in the right room. They give this, for those who don't know, they say you could die if you drink on this. And it was really weird, because I don't know why I bought it. If you drink on this, and they tell me these horror stories, and I believed it. So, I took it, and, and I didn't drink. I just toughed it out. And I can remember strange things happening to me during that time. I look back on it now, and I thank God that I didn't get sent to that treatment facility right away, because I don't know if I was ready. The month and a half sober made me ready. Because things were happening to me that I couldn't explain. Things like, I'm afraid to go out of my room. Which, if you can relate to, that's fine. Marines aren't afraid to go anywhere, I wasn't afraid to hurt people, but I'm afraid to leave my room. And I'm starting to do things that I learned as a kid, in parochial school, and I start praying. I hadn't prayed in a long time, but I'm praying. I'm not really sure why. I just want relief. And I'm hiding. And, I had a split with God that, I never really was an atheist. I always believed in God, but, God helped good people. And I got my own agenda. And, that was kind of my belief when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. And that has since changed dramatically. And what happened was I was doing those things, and that month and a half made me willing, because by the time I got to the treatment center, I was restless, irritable, and discontent before I even read that book and knew what it was, and I was coming out of my skin. And when I got there, I was slightly willing to maybe consider, I might need some help. And that's the way I entered treatment. Not that, don't get me wrong, it wasn't like I surrendered right away. I had to go through, there was a 45-day program, and I had a counselor, and this woman was brutal. She was one of us. And she knew people like me and what people like me do. And here's what people like me do. I call it the bobblehead syndrome. Chris, you need help. You know? Yeah, I know. Yeah. And here's what's going on behind the scene. Would you just leave me alone? We'll get along fine. The whole idea. And that's because I was not a person who took direction very well. And, it was amazing. I was in the Marine Corps, and I didn't take direction. It was funny. It was a really weird thing. And I'm in this treatment facility, and they got people coming in and telling their story, what they were like, what happened, and what they're like today. And something happened while I was there. Not right away. I mean, it was, I was willing. Something had a slight bit of willingness, and something happened. And they started doing what my sponsor did for me, and they were sharing what they were like, what happened, and what they were like today. And something happened, I couldn't fight it. Something happened during that time, being a captive audience and listening to people share their story. Because I'm the type of person that if you tell me what to do, I'm really good at taking your inventory. And just got a knack of finding little flaws in your makeup. And I was very good at exploiting them. I still am to this day. I have that knack. I think it helps with sponsorship, actually. But it doesn't help me with my own inventory. And that's what was happening. These people were sharing their experience, what alcohol did for them, and what alcohol did to them. And they started talking about things that I hadn't heard. Because I'm sitting in this meeting, and a couple of them would share this, but some of them wouldn't. And what's happening is I'm sitting here sober. I'm sober almost 2 months at this time. And they're talking about how wonderful everything is now that they've stopped drinking. And me too. Yeah. Because I got a 45-day program. I get done with that. I only got 2 months left to do, and I'm out with an honorable discharge. And yeah. And, so I'm sitting there, and it was just, something happened. It was God intervention. And for the first time, I started, identifying with somebody. And what happened was they started taking me through the process. And what I was doing, I was judging my insides with other people's outsides, what I saw. And what I heard them saying. Because they seemed happy and, they seemed like they were sober and they were saying how wonderful life was. I just wasn't feeling wonderful inside. But I couldn't tell anybody about how I was feeling inside because, first of all, I don't come from a family or that was not part of my makeup. Because if you were like me, you exploited people who told how they felt. And it was just wired into me. That's why I tend to have a hard time with that in sobriety. Emotions it's not my strong suit. And, they were doing stuff, and and I knew because they were touching something inside of me. And what they started saying was that they took me through the doctor's opinion. We are restless, irritable, and discontent, sober. That's what they're talking about. That's why we drank again. And they started taking me through that process. And what happens to people like me when I start drinking? I can't stop. Don't want to stop. That's why I never identified with people try to. Not really. I never really had a problem stopping. I stopped half a dozen times for various reasons, and short stints, and but I could never stay stopped. That was the thing, because if I get sober on a Monday, by Friday I want my cookie, because I've been a good boy and I've been working hard. I got about a 5-day, and that was about it. I wasn't even, and at the end it wasn't even 5 days, and that's the way it was, and. And I'm doing what I do because that's all I know, and I got to, and I'd sober up due to consequences, and I can't stand being sober. It's not a conscious thought; it's riding right below the surface. My emotions are intense. Some people seem to get sober and they level out emotionally. I've seen some people like that. I've seen some people try to do that. That's more of the case. But, from my very first time in Alcoholics Anonymous, I had thrown myself in this process, not because I think I caught on any quicker or I'm any smarter or anything like that. I was just nuts. I was intense. My emotions. What happens to me is after I'm sober any short period of time, my emotions intensify. And, and it's just like... and I can't stand it. And my eyes naturally float. I heard that described in a meeting one time, about how, I'm always sizing things up. I'm always floating around the room, checking things out. And it just seems to be wired in, and, you sober something like that up and don't give it a solution. You got, very sick individual, and that's what I was. While I'm smiling, you know. And, they're saying, well, Chris, how does that make you feel? You know, and I don't want to tell you how I'm feeling because I don't know how I'm feeling, And if you press me, I want to kill you, Really, if that was honest, I want to remove the threat is really what it is. Not that I want you dead. Well, if that removes the threat, that's what's going on inside of me. And I can't, how do you tell people about that? They're going to come and lock me up, And that's what one of my big fears when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous in the treatment center is that maybe I'm not alcoholic. That was one of my biggest fears when I got there because what's happening inside of me isn't natural, isn't what people who are sober should be feeling like. You should be, happy, joyous, and free and, and walking hand in hand with this. No, I don't know. It's just an idea, I don't know why. I can't say that I can blame people in Alcoholics Anonymous for that because, that was just what was my perception of what was going on. And what happened basically is I got sober and I got out and I threw a bag in my car, tried to go back to New York and live. It wasn't happening. The day I got back, I had the keys to the bar. I'm closing up, messing with the barmaid. And, just right back to everything I did before, except I'm sober now, I could do it better. I don't know why I latched on. I think someone said that in the meeting. You can do whatever you want sober, better. So, okay. So, but here's what's happening. I'm sober 6-9 months. I'm back in New York. I'm trying to do my old life and do my old thing. It ain't working. I'm coming out of my skin. I'm not going to meetings because I don't know anybody there. And, I did the best I could. I threw a bag in my car and drove out to Las Vegas. I wasn't intending to come here. I was heading west. And I just knew I had to go. That's all, because I could not stand what was going on inside me where I was. And I knew I was about to drink because they did sell me. I did surrender in that program. I did have a spiritual experience that affected me dramatically. And I knew what I was. However, I still wasn't willing to do what I needed to do. And I knew I was about to drink if I stayed in New York, so I did the best thing I could. I threw her back in my car and stopped in Memphis. And very bizarre experience, really. As I'm in Memphis, I went back to see my counselor, and she said, "Where you going?" I said, "Well, my uncle lives in Vegas. I think I'm going to stop out there." And she said, "I heard there's some really cool things happening in the Seattle area." Well, no, 20 years later, that I would wind up there. I mean, it was never conscious, So I came here, and what happened to me here is that I knew I had to get plugged in, or I was going to drink, and sure enough, I did. And I got here, and I went to a meeting, and I just threw myself into going to meetings. I got a meeting schedule, and I went to the Thai club, and and I hung out at the Thai club and met some really cool and interesting people, and we did some really cool and interesting things. Sober, hung out the Turning Point quite a bit. Just did a lot of stuff. My best friend, met my best friend there, Mike Finch, and him and I, we just did things together like, people do. When they hook up in this program and start running around in the pack, there was a pack of us. It was me and Mike, and shortly afterwards, Mehdi started coming around. He got sober, and there was a few of us, Kelsey, and we just started doing AA stuff. And I went to a lot of meetings, and and it was helping, because while I was in the meeting, I wasn't here. As soon as I left the meeting, I went back. It's what I do. And so the only relief I had was going to a lot of meetings, and I went to a lot of meetings, and until it stopped doing that, it stopped taking away that edge, and I got a sponsor, and started going through the process. And this man sponsored me for over 20 years. And he just died about a year ago. And it was pretty devastating. Emotionally, here's the funny thing. I've grown light years in some areas of my life. In other areas, I'm still a child. Emotionally, I don't know. I haven't grown that far there. And what happened was, like I said, I got involved in Alcoholics Anonymous. I jumped in with both feet. I got How It Works group was my home group my first 11 years, and they were a very healthy, active group. And we did a lot of what healthy, active groups do. We did a lot of 12-step work. We did, we went to institutions and we took the message and step work and things like that. And that was what I needed. And it was more than just going to meetings for me. It was going to meetings. It was working the steps. It was having a sponsor. Because life's happening, life's coming at me, and what skills did I have? I had drunk skills, that's what I did, and my world centered around me. Now I'm trying to live sober in the world, and I have no clue, and I'm smiling a lot because here's my makeup. I ain't gonna tell you, I'm really just uncomfortable, and I don't know how to do these things. That's not something I readily admit. Is I don't know how to do something. Can you please help me? It's just not. Part of my nature. However, I have learned to do those things. And I do those things today on a daily basis because I know I have this thing called alcoholism. And what I found by going through the process of what alcoholism really is, I have alcoholism whether I drink or I don't drink. I didn't know that when I got here. I thought if I just don't drink because maybe I'm alcoholic and, I could be like you good people and do the right thing and whatever. That was an idea. And what happens is I have alcoholism when I drink. I don't drink. It's obvious that I have alcoholism when I drink because I do things, when that alcohol hits my system, I do things. It's just, it's not like I intentionally go out and say, I'm just going to go out and go to jail, or go hurt God's kids or, hurt, it was just, it was more like, it was unintentional. It was just that you got my way, of the party. And, sometimes I got angry at people and wanted to hurt them, but, it was more, not that spiritual, but it was more, this is just what I'm doing, and, they got in my way. And, so Alcoholics Anonymous in this town has saved my life. And if you're here, please stay. I hope that you find something here and you surrender and you go through the process and you find that many of us have found here in Alcoholics Anonymous. The reality is that most won't. I'm not saying most here, but most alcoholics are doomed. I've gotten some close ties with people here, and I'm not a close tie person. I'm not. And I talked to my sponsor tonight before the meeting. I went to Rich Potter's house before and, doing the fellowship thing. And, it's amazing. Here's what happened to me when I got to Rich's house. I'm welcome with open arms. Rich, like, what do you want? Anything you want. Here's what starts happening inside of me. Oh, my God, I got to speak. It's just like the focus, all day. Kevin asked me yesterday. I was fine, for most of today and all that. And I'm doing fine. And, all of a sudden I get to Rich's house and everyone's being nice to me. And here's what happens. The focus goes right back on me. And I just start getting uncomfortable. And it has nothing to do with you. I am in a room full of people and, that are friends, people I sponsor, people I've shared my life with. And all of a sudden it just goes whoosh. And something happened as I'm sitting near my sponsor calls because I had called him earlier, and I go in Rich's room and I'm standing there talking to my sponsor, and I tell him what's going on, and I said, I'm coming out of my skin, I'm getting uncomfortable, and and there's no real apparent reason here because I'm surrounded by people and friends and things like that. Well, there was a couple that I don't know I have questions about. But it had nothing to do with them, no. And so, he starts, sponsorship. 22 years sober, and I'm getting direction from my sponsor because I'm really uncomfortable. And I'm not a person who's been disconnected from AA. I'm a person who's been in the middle of AA, and I'm still feeling uncomfortable right at that moment. And he starts sharing, well, Chris, why don't you try telling me your story? If you're interested in being a sponsor, we call this spiritual trickery. But, here's what he said. Poking fun at that. He said, why don't you tell him? I said, because I'm going to be in a room full of people who most of them know my story. In fact, I shared a lot of my story with here and a lot of my sobriety with here. And he said, why don't you tell him a little bit about what happened when you left? Got the last 5 minutes. Tell you what happened since I've left. And, I've been back a number of times. There's still some guys in this room I sponsor. And I've been back probably in a year and a half, 5-6 times, through a course and series of events that were not really what I set out to do, but I just happened to be here a lot. and that's why you're seeing this guy again. But what happened to me is when I left, my sponsor had just died, and I had a temporary sponsor. Bob was my temporary sponsor at that time, and I moved, and I got up and tried to create the fellowship that I crave, because I learned that. I learned an ethic in Alcoholics Anonymous of the things we do. You know, Clancy calls it pockets of enthusiasm, and I tried to find that, and I couldn't. I really, and it was weird, because I've been going to different places, and I wasn't finding it, and it took me almost a year to find it. And during that year, I was basically flying without a sponsor. And, my life didn't go like right downhill, but I was fairly uncomfortable inside. I was still working with a lot of guys and going to meetings. It's an ethic that I have. And, even talking to the guys that I sponsor about what was going on inside of me, some of the things that were happening. But what happens with me, it's not that a sponsor, it's not that a human being can keep me sober. But here's what my sponsor does for me that I can't do for myself, is that he redirects me, and this is after going through the steps and working with a lot of people, and this is what happens to me even to this day, is because I'm the type of person who gets misdirected quickly. I really believe what's going on in my head is really true, and here's an old idea: if you just do what I want, we'll get along fine. I have a wife and 2 children, I have a job, I have a lot of people in my life. And if they would just do what I want, it's a recurring thing. And what that does is it shuts me off from the grace of God. Because what's really wrong with me, is that I'm spiritually sick. And it's not by chance they call alcohol spirits. And, when I took a drink of alcohol, it did that for me. It filled that hole. I didn't care what the consequences were. I really didn't, And sober, though, sober, I'm spiritually sick. I have alcoholism whether I drink or I don't drink, and what I need is a power greater than myself to fill that hole. And I can't get to that power on my own, I really can't. And even to this day, don't get me wrong, I pray every day, and, and I do the brief meditation. And, I work with other people and do those things, but I cannot get to that power on my own. I tried, and I need people outside of me to help me take a look at what's going on and what I'm doing. Because what I'm doing is not necessarily what I think I'm doing. I'm like right after the ABCs, what does it mean to turn my will and my life over to this power? I have to be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. I got here, I was functionally illiterate. I have a college degree. I have all the success and the things that have happened to me. I still have alcoholism. I'm going to die with alcohol. I'm not dying from alcoholism today. I've learned some things in Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a power in my life today. I have friends in my life today that I owe to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I have a good life today. And beyond just having a good life today, most of the time, I'm really enjoying that. And I'm not a person who enjoys being sober by nature. And I want to thank this specific group again for inviting me to speak tonight. Thank you.